Hello friends, welcome once again to the fabulous world of stories from Culture Katha. I'm super excited to finally start with my new series on the Mahabharata. Now, anyone who has a wee bit of an idea of the Mahabharata knows that telling its story is no easy task. But I'm going to try my best to unbox the magical world of the epic for you. So if you like this video, please take a moment to hit the like button, share the video with friends and family, and also do subscribe to the channel. Also, please do leave your thoughts and ideas in the comment section below. Your views are extremely dear to me and your feedback will be very helpful too. So, look forward to hearing from you. So, are we good to go now? No, wait a minute. Friends, Mahabharata is like a vast and deep ocean. So before we actually take a dive into it, it would be a good idea to know a little more about the journey we are embarking on. So I want to start with reminding you of a little story that we have heard in our childhood. Remember the story of the elephant and the 6 blind men? About how once 6 men were blindfolded and taken to an elephant and asked to identify it by touching and feeling it, and how they all came up with very different ideas about what it was. The reason for their confusion was that they had never seen an elephant in their life and they had no clue what it was. You all know the story, but why am I telling it to you now? Because that's exactly how the Western scholars reacted when they first set their eyes on the Mahabharata. They were both flabbergasted and fascinated, but mostly flabbergasted. They had not seen anything like this before in world literature, neither in terms of size nor in terms of contents. For them, the epic was like an elephant. The Mahabharata is nearly 8 times the size of the Greek epics, Iliad and Odyssey put together. Indeed, with anywhere between 90,000 to 100,000 shlokas or couplets, Mahabharata was and is the world's longest epic poem even today. And it was not just the size that terrified the scholars, but also the length, breadth and depth of its contents. In fact, one Western scholar even went to the extent of labeling the epic a monstrous chaos. Another scholar complained that the epic had no clear beginning, no clear story, gave no indication of a clear date when it was composed, and worse, we didn't even know who its true author was. The confusion and frustration felt by the Western scholars was understandable, partly because of the extreme complexity of the text. Over and above the core story of the Kurus, the epic has many layers to it. So what are these layers and why are they there and how do we understand them? In other words, what is the Mahabharata? The epic itself outlines the scope of its contents when it says, everything there is to be found here. Anything that's not here is nowhere to be found. The claim does sound a bit arrogant, but it's no exaggeration, as we shall see. The encyclopedic contents of the epic can be put into 4 categories. To begin with, the epic doles out loads of teachings for the common man on how he should lead his life by righteous action and what duties he should perform in the various stages of his life. Then there are detailed discourses on politics and statecraft, including laws and ethics of a society, duties of a ruler, and insights, some great insights on the art of war. The epic also delves into diverse religious ideas and doctrines, from extremely complex Vedic sacrificial rituals to simple forms of worship such as ancestor worship or the merits to be accrued from visiting places of pilgrimage or through the pursuit of bhakti, which is devotion to a personal god. And last but not the least, the epic has as its part the crest jewel of Indian philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita. Phew, from social norms to politics to war to religion to philosophy, the epic has something to say about it all. It's no wonder then that the epic is referred to as the fifth Veda, which contains the composite knowledge of the Vedas and the Upanishads put together. Now you get the frustration of the Western scholars? Fortunately for us, many of these ideas are woven into the text in the form of little and big stories. Stories that borrow from a whole lot of myths, legends and folklore, and that's a relief. But how did the epic grow so big? How did it come to amass so much of content? Did Vyasa really compose the entire epic of 90,000 plus verses? Now this is where we run into a problem, because the epic itself claims that Vyasa composed a text called the Bharata with only 24,000 shlokas or verses. So how did it grow into this gigantic epic we have today? It's widely accepted now that the version of the epic we have today had much humbler origins. Scholars who have studied the text and analyzed its contents identify three stages of development of the epic. At its earliest stage, the work, they say, was in the form of bardic poetry that only described the fierce battle of the Kurukshetra. Bardic poetry was poetry composed by bards describing the war exploits of kings. These bards accompanied the kings and the warriors to the battlefield and composed the happenings on the battlefield in the form of poems. Now, those of you who are broadly familiar with the Mahabharata may know that Sanjaya, who described the war taking place at Kurukshetra, was a bard himself, or a Suta as he was called in Sanskrit. So the segment of the epic that describes the Kurukshetra war is identified as the oldest part of the epic. At this stage, the epic was also probably known by another name, Jaya, which means victory. And then we have the text itself mention a version called the Bharata, composed of 24,000 verses. This, scholars say, formed the second stage in the evolution of the epic. Eventually, it reached the final stage of becoming Mahabharata, or the Grand Bharata, which is the huge epic we have today with over 90,000 verses. So what caused the epic to swell 4 times in size? It appears that the popularity of the Kuru story turned the epic into a sort of a story magnet. Anyone who wanted a story told used the epic as a vehicle to carry it. So over time, several myths, legends and folklore became a part of the epic. It is said that the Mahabharata has 67 subtales or upakhyanas that are not part of its core narrative. These upakhyanas include the story of Rama called Ramopakhyana, the story of Lord Kartikeya's birth, the story of Krishna and his Yadava clan, apart from hundreds of little stories about gods, sages, Brahmins and kings. But the most important reason why all these stories found their way to the epic is because the epic was composed in a pre-literate society. The bardic tale was composed and shared orally for a long time before it was actually written down. So anyone who told the story added a little bit of his own to it. Depending on the narrator, the addition could have either been in the form of a myth or a lengthy discourse on statecraft or a discussion on a religious doctrine. Today, the text we have is organized into 18 parvans or books, with 2 of the books, the Shanti Parvan and the Aranyaka Parvan, being the fattest. Of these, the Shanti Parvan contains long discourses on politics and kingship, while the Aranyaka Parvan, or the Vana Parvan as it's also called, dwells on virtues and ethics and several upakhyanas or subtales. it is possible that most of the additions to the text happened in these two books. So friends, starting from Jaya to becoming Bharata and finally to becoming the Mahabharata, the epic has undergone a long and enriching journey across space and time. Experts tell us that this journey probably took a good 1,000 years before Jaya was transformed into the Mahabharata we know today. Obviously, a work of such gigantic proportions is not easy to fit into a neat little structure, and it shows. So, we have not one but three narrators telling the story. The three narrators are sage Vaishampayana and Ugrashravas and the chronicler of the battle Sanjaya. This also means that there's a whole lot of content that gets repeated. Not to mention, of course, the innumerable stories, fables and parables that keep popping up at the drop of a hat. So, are these countless stories and upakhyanas the reason why the Western scholars call the epic a literary monster? Not really. These stories may not be part of the core story that narrates the rift in the Kuru family. But we would be wrong in thinking that these stories have no role to play in the broad theme of the epic, because they very well do. Most of these sub-stories are narrated in the context of a key event in the main story. For example, when the Pandavas are roaming the forest in exile after having lost the game of dice, a sage in the forest narrates the story of Nala Damayanti to King Yudhishthira. In the story, King Nala too had faced a similar situation of losing his kingdom in a game of dice to his cousin. So we find that most of these stories actually tie up nicely to the main story. So for those who approach it blindfolded, the epic may seem like an elephant made up of an assorted animal, made up of tree trunk for legs, snake for a trunk and rope for a tail. But for those who read the text in depth and see its underlying patterns, the epic comes across as a huge banyan tree, a tree that had its beginnings in a small seed, but a tree that grew organically into a cohesive whole, branching out into multiple roots and shoots and sprouting a huge canopy that became home to a rich variety of life forms, including diverse stories and ideas. Friends, stay with me on this epic journey as we explore more of the diversity in the epic and also some contradictory ideas it presents in my next video. Till we meet again, it's Tada, bye bye, take care.
ah